Member for Hindmarsh.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and it's a great opportunity to be here to speak today about this Labor government's reforms and the good things that we have been doing for the Australian nation. And here we go again from those opposite, listening to them, the opposition once again talking down the economy, saying anything, doing anything, just to wreck the confidence and wreck jobs for their own political purposes. That is a disgrace, Deputy Speaker. This is a time in the Australian economy where it's a clear standout, and we've seen what's been taking place all around the world. We saw the US celebrate to joyous screams of celebrations when their unemployment came down to 8.2% only a couple of weeks ago. We've seen unemployment in Europe reach staggering amounts of, at the moment, I think it's 10.7%. And we know what's been taking place in the world. We are the envy of world economies, and those opposite, for their own political purposes, talking down the economy, talking down the confidence, and all they're doing is trying to wreck jobs for their own dastardly political interests. Deputy Speaker, our economy has grown 7% since the GFC. That is remarkable. And that just didn't happen by us sitting back and folding our arms and saying that the GFC was only a hiccup, as their opposition Treasurer said. This was a real issue that was confronting us. And we had all the advice that was coming from Treasury was that over 250,000 people would be unemployed, they would lose their jobs, they wouldn't be able to pay their mortgages if we sat back and did exactly what those opposite wanted us to do, fold our arms and just ride it through. We heard the member for Moncrief criticise our BERs. When I go to BERs in my electorate, and I've pretty well opened all of them thus far, we see BERs or Building Education Revolution construction sites and building projects that $2 million, $1 million, $1,500,000, $3 million, and at each and every one I ask the same question. And the question is, how many people were employed on this project site? And the answer that I get back is anything from 50 to a couple of hundred people. Now, when you multiply that by 26,000 across the nation, you can see how we got out of the GFC. We didn't get out of it by taking their advice, we got out of it by taking Treasury's advice, and I'm very pleased that we did, because today many of those mums and dads still have their jobs, they still have a good economy, one of the best economies in the world, and we're still doing fine compared to the rest of the world. So to hear the rubbish that we've just heard from across the crossbenchers is absolute. It's so cynical that they're doing this just for their own political purposes, and at the same time talking down our good economy that's one of the best in the world. And in fact, we've had the opposition leader who was in London recently even admit that we are doing well and we've got one of the best economies in the world. Deputy Speaker, as I said, our market-orientated reforms have been the basis of our greatest changes to Australian life. Whether we look at our history, across the history of Australia, the improvements to Australian quality of life that we've seen over the last half-century, and I've got to say a lot of those reforms were in the Hawke-Keating years, where a lot of those things that were put in place today have built those foundations for us today to have a good market economy. Labor has introduced to Australia market-orientated reforms that have made us more productive, more flexible and more dynamic, more efficient and much more wealthy than we would have been if we'd listened to those on the other side. Deputy Speaker, when Labor pursued the market-orientated reform of floating the dollar, those opposite opposed it. When Labor pursued the market-orientated reform of increasing competition in the finance industry, those opposite opposed it. When Labor pursued the market-orientated reform of dramatically increasing our private national savings and private investment, those opposite oppose it. That's through our superannuation. Nothing has changed. They oppose everything. They are, after all, the no-alition, as they've come to know, and opposing for the sake of opposition. Deputy Speaker, when Labor pursued the market-oriented reform of enterprise-based wage and productivity bargaining, those opposite opposed it again. And when eventually those opposite assumed the Treasury benches, we saw nothing like the market-oriented reform of Labor. We only saw decreasing productivity gains and increasing lethargy. Labor has consistently been the one party in the national debate which has pursued market-based reform that actually improves ordinary Australian quality of life. And we've seen that, Deputy Speaker. We saw it through the GFC. Labor reform has given rise to a modern, competitive, export-orientated economy which was strong and flexible enough to withstand the worst financial crisis the world has ever seen since the Great Depression, Deputy Speaker. And we did that thanks to the market-oriented reforms of the Hawke-Keating governments, and we're doing it today as well. And let's not be cute. Let's not be cute with the truth on that point. As I said, families across our nation survived largely intact through the GFC, which devastated the lives of millions around the world, millions of families in comparable countries like ours. Our unemployment rates are roughly half those, as I said earlier, of the US, and much lower than Europe through that period. Deputy Speaker, of course, the work of this Labor government contributed substantially to the confidence in the Australian market and lounge rooms and showroom floors that we saw us sustain our economy and our jobs through those years of the GFC. Unlike what the member was saying, that money was wasted, etc., we saw our economy get through because of those reforms that we took place during the GFC a few years ago. And Deputy Speaker, just as the Hawke-Keating governments engaged in pro-market reform as the best vehicle, the very best vehicle to deliver sustainable improvements to the quality of life of ordinary Australians across the nation, so too has this Labor government, Deputy Speaker. The agenda of taking care of Australia and Australians through taking care of the economic settings and structures remains absolutely fundamental to this government and to Labor. Deputy Speaker, Labor is the party, Labor is the government of market reform, unlike those opposite. We embrace the market as a mechanism for the prioritisation of tasks, the allocations of resources and the reward of effectiveness. Consequently, we share our corner, the corner of economic theory and sound economic practices, with the conclusions of the Productivity Commission, Treasury, eminent economists here in Australia and abroad, and economists throughout our community. The opposition has in its corner the old guard theorists of command economics, the discredited apologists of Soviet-style economic administration, and those who dream of a sugar candy mountain where everything is predetermined, safe, fluffy and nice, guided by the invisible hand slipping into your back pocket. That's the reform of those opposite. And Deputy Speaker, there's no better example of the gulf that exists between Labor's and the other side's approach to economic questions than the policy area of climate change. And we heard the member for Fraser talk about it earlier. On the government side, we have a market mechanism, an emissions trading scheme to drive change on the basis of cost, profitability, innovation and competitiveness, at least possible price to the community, Deputy Speaker, as a whole. On the other side, we have a command economy style system where a fat cat sits back and taps winners on the shoulders, picking those of the biggest polluters to whom the opposition would hand over billions of taxpayers' dollars. Then the Leader of the Opposition says his polluter subsidy scheme is a market approach because, and I paraphrase, we'll go to the market to ask for companies to come forward asking for handouts. That makes it a market approach. It's unbelievable. There is no commodity, there is no pricing, there is no trading, there is no engagement, bar those lucky few who get a whopping great cheque in the mail. Clearly there is no market approach and no market-based reform by those opposite. We also have the government's focus on returning the budget to surplus, Deputy Speaker. It's good for the bottom line and good for the increasing availability of capital for private sector investments. No one can argue with that. The Conservatives supported returning the budget to surplus. They harked on about it for years. Now they wouldn't even do it themselves if they were in government. They say it wouldn't rank as this is what they've said, as more than an aspiration at this point of time. So in other words, they'd continue to deliver deficits year after year. They'd continue to spend more than they can afford. And that's quite obvious by the remarks and what's being said by those opposite. We can't know what they're doing. We don't know what their future will be. I mean, the other day we heard Julie Bishop, the member for Curtin, tell us that in a conversation with the Indonesian ambassador that that's not what Tony Abbott meant. So we don't know what he means half the time. And as I said, they'd continue to dry up available capital and make it even harder for Australian businesses to invest in their own futures, Deputy Speaker, and the futures of their employees and their families. So let's not forget who all this is for. It's for the people of our electorates, the people of our suburbs and neighbourhoods who need that job, who need that pay packet, who need the businesses they work for to work hard and smart to make a profit, Deputy Speaker. These people of this nation, the mums, the dads, the kids, the young, the uncles, the aunts, are all that need, as I said, the job, and certainly which in turn relies on performing in their respective marketplace and making a dollar. And I support the policies and the market reforms of this government.